everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. Listeners, we've made it to the end of May, and summer is just around the corner. Long days, hot weather, kids getting out of school. It's a great time of the year to travel with family and friends. I hope everyone has some really fun stuff planned for the next few months. Of course, you guys know me, I hate the hot weather. Anyway, the end of May this year has been a little emotional for me. You listeners know that my dad died 6 months ago, and May 31st would have been his 68th birthday. My family plans to celebrate Dad's birthday this year. I'm sure we'll watch the Baltimore Orioles game in his honor, but it'll be rough not to have Dad here to celebrate with us. One of my favorite memories is how passionate he always was about the O's. He would get so angry at the team this year. I can already imagine him complaining about which players are underperforming and how the front office doesn't know what they're doing. Honestly, it would be pretty funny. Well, Dad, here's hoping the O's take your suggestions to heart, and maybe they'll make a run and finish the year at least 500. And maybe that'll begin on your birthday. Listener, coming up on today's show, the crisis in the Connacht cluster continues. Nil Spar and the Yavatha have brought the New Republic government to the brink of collapse, and Leia struggles to find a way to hold it together. Meanwhile, Luke searches for more information about his and Leia's mother, and whether she's still alive and in hiding with the Falanasi. And finally, Lando, Lobot, and the droids remain trapped in an ancient organic starship. Can they unravel the ship's mysteries and escape before their resources run out? It's Shield of Lies by Michael P. QB McDowell, the second book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. And I'll talk about the book coming up in just a few minutes. But first, it's listener question time, and we have another email about Han and Lando and Sabacc. It comes from longtime listener Robin. Robin says, "Hello, Aaron. I notice that the lives of smugglers and gamblers are often shown as heroic in Star Wars, and everyone who wants to arrest them is framed as, quote, the bad guy. It can even be an early sign of forcibility if you are very good at the Sabacc table. I get the appeal, but I still find it weird. Lando Calrissian won Cloud City in a Sabacc game. Did he win that fair and square? Did Han Solo always play fair and square?" Well, thank you very much for the email, Robin. On the last episode, I said that we know Lando cheated at least once from the ending of Solo: A Star Wars Story. But I don't know if he ever tried to cheat any other times. So I assume he won Cloud City fair and square. And as far as I know, Han was never caught cheating. He was always described as lucky. Maybe unusually lucky. As far as the smugglers and gamblers being portrayed as, quote, good, and those trying to stop them being portrayed as, quote, bad, I think it's another example of George Lucas's opinions about institutions and those in authority. He doesn't trust them. He often thinks they stifle freedom and creativity. He thinks they become so beholden to the rules and regulations that they forget that their charter missions are to help people. When Lucas was young, he was considered a rebel, a Hollywood outsider, a scoundrel, if you will. And we've all heard about his clashes with the studios and the Directors Guild. The tensions between the scoundrels and the authorities in Star Wars are similar as the tension between Lucas and the authorities in Hollywood. The little guy against the big guy. It's built into the Star Wars DNA. Now, as to whether or not we should see some of the smugglers and gamblers as bad guys, because they are in fact breaking the law a lot, the only ones I can think of that are typically shown as bad are the ones that work for the big crime syndicates, except for Han Solo, and the ones that work in the slave trade. Thanks again for the email, Robin. Now, listener, if you have a question you'd like me to answer on the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's book, Shield of Lies by Michael P. Cuby McDowell, the second book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. Now, one thing, listener, before I begin talking about this book, the structure of Shield of Lies is different from the first and third books of the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. Instead of jumping between the three main plot lines, Cuby McDowell focuses on each story individually. I'll share my opinion about that change in structure in the second half of the podcast. But since this is the way the author intended readers to experience the story, that's the way I'm going to present the plot summary here in the first half of the show. Sound good? Great. Grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins on the Telgecon Vagabond. Lando, Lobot, R2, and 3PO continue to investigate the ancient starship. The vessel is still in hyperspace, and our heroes have no way to contact anyone about where they are, and no way to figure out where they're going. Lando believes the only way to free themselves is to figure out a way to take over the ship. The group finds itself floating in zero gravity in the middle of a huge corridor. Lando orders R2 and 3PO to keep trying to interpret the ridges and symbols that they see on the walls, while he and Lobot consider their next course of action. The only thing they know is that when Lando cut a hole in the bulkhead after they first came aboard, the ship healed itself. They travel through the corridor for nearly 3 days when R2 spots a small spot on the wall that looks different from the rest. Lando thinks it's a control panel, but for what, he and Lobot don't know. While they debate what to do, 3PO accidentally bumps against the panel. It releases a shock, damaging 3PO's arm and voice encoder. The electric charge travels along the walls of the corridor, returning every few minutes. Lobot realizes that the group isn't in one of the habitable areas of the starship. They're actually in some sort of power conduit, and they have to get out before they get fried. Lando quickly cuts a hole in one of the bulkheads, and they escape to an adjoining room. There, they discover different images on the walls. It's like a mural of the Kayla, telling their history and the ice age that was slowly covering their planet. R2 discovers how to open a door which leads to another mural room. Lando and Lobot theorize that the Kayla realized that their planet was slowly freezing, and that they would go extinct. Lando and Lobot contemplate why a dying people would build a strange, empty starship before vanishing when they feel a shudder. The Telgecon Vagabond has returned to real space. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker and Akana a member of the White Current, continue their search for the Falinasi. Akana says she was cut off from the Falinasi when she was young, after the group had gone into hiding during the Great Jedi Purge. Luke also wants to find out information about he and Leia's mother, who Akana says is a member of the Falinasi. The two began their search on the planet Lukazek. They didn't find the Falinasi there, but Akana did find a message in the White Current, pointing the way to the planet Tyr. Now on Tyr, Akana leads Luke to a village where she says a childhood friend of hers once lived. When they arrive, they find nothing. On the street where Akana says her friend lived, the house is just gone. They speak to a neighbor who tells them that the home was demolished years ago. The news frustrates Akana, but Luke suggests they keep looking. Maybe her friend simply moved to another house. Akana says no. If her friend was still on the planet, she would know. But they do learn something. The name of the ship the Falinasi used to leave Tyr. Luke contacts Coruscant and learns that the ship has jumped all around the mid-rim throughout the years. Its last two stops were at Atziri and Jittapatan. Luke sets a course for Jittapatan, but Akana stops him. She wants to go to Atziri. However, when they arrive on Atziri, Akana does something strange. She says she must conduct the next part of the search alone and insists that Luke stay on the ship. But Akana isn't really looking for the Falinasi. Atziri is the homeworld of her estranged father. Akana sneaks away to see him while Luke stays on the transport. But the reunion isn't a happy one. Akana finds her father and finds the man is addicted to Rachna Blue, a narcotic that has ruined his memory. The man is sympathetic to Akana's story, but he says he just doesn't remember her, or her mother, or the Falinasi. In fact, the man says he doesn't remember anything more than a few months ago. Devastated, Akana returns to her ship and admits what just happened to Luke. They should have never come to Atziri. If she and Luke are going to find the Falinasi, they need to head to Jittapatan. Luke searches for the planet in the ship's database. He finds it near the galactic core in an area of space that sounds very familiar. In fact, it's been all over the HoloNews lately, because Jittapatan is located just inside the Cornoct cluster. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Chief of State Leia Organa Solo fends off attacks by the New Republic Senate. The recent broadcast by the Yvathan Viceroy Nil Spar, accusing Leia of trying to conquer the Cornoct cluster and comparing her to Darth Vader, have enabled some of Leia's political opponents to band together and denounce her decision to send the Fifth Fleet to patrol the area outside the cluster. And the demands of the fleet's commander, General Etan Abat, will not make things go any easier for Leia. General Abat asks Admiral Akbar for additional warships, reinforcements from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fleets. Leia refuses the requests and orders Akbar to make it clear to General Abat, unless the Yvatha attack, do not enter the Cornoct cluster. Abat establishes a defensive perimeter just outside the cluster, but he tells Akbar that he just can't adequately deploy his ships unless he gets more information about the Yvathan forces. After talking to Leia and Akbar, General Abat is contacted by Admiral Drayson of New Republic Intelligence. Drayson shows Abat pictures of the planet Dornick 319, where the Yvatha wiped out the planet's Kubaz inhabitants. General Abat leads a small battle group to blockade the planet, inviting the Yvatha into a confrontation. The plan works. The Yvatha attack, destroying a New Republic frigate before General Abbott orders his ships to retreat. Once again, the New Republic is now at war. Elsewhere, the sole survivor of the Avetha's attack on Polni recovers in a military hospital. Platt Millar awakens from his Bacta treatment to find Admiral Akbar sitting in his room. The Admiral thanks Millar for providing the only first-hand information about the Avetha's attacks. Unfortunately, Platt Millar is now the only surviving citizen of Polni. Millar asks if the New Republic can do anything to make the Avetha answer for what they did to his people. Perhaps, Akbar says, but it'll take time for the Senate to agree on how to address the situation. In the meantime, the Admiral offers Platt Millar a chance to personally get back at the Avetha. Akbar tells Millar that he must be an impressive pilot to escape during the attack on Polni, and once he fully recovers, Akbar offers Millar a ferry pilot position, transporting troops and war material. Yes, Millar says, anything to bring the Avetha to justice. General Abbott orders 2 squadrons of recon X-Wings into the Cornock cluster. He needs more intelligence. Their mission? To jump to 24 of the planets where he thinks the Avetha have positioned most of the ships of the former Imperial Black Fleet. The recon X-Wings drop back into real space and immediately begin transmitting. Leia, Akbar, and the members of the Senate Defense Council watch as the images begin to roll in. What they see is astonishing. Dozens of Victory-class and Imperial-class Star Destroyers, as well as several smaller frigates, corvettes, and a few interdictor cruisers. And dwarfing them all, 3 super Star Destroyers. The recon X-Wings transmit as many images as they can, but none of the 24 pilots make it to their exit jump points. However, following the events at Dornick 319, and now the destruction of the 24 recon X-Wings, the Defense Council forces Leia to remove General Abbott from command. She relents and orders Han to return to the Fifth Fleet. Locked in his office, Tig Paramus opens his secret communicator to Nil Spar. The junior senator from Wallala tells the Viceroy that Leia is sending her husband to relieve General Abbott. Nil Spar uses the information to capture Han's transport before it arrives at the Fifth Fleet and takes Han into custody. The Viceroy broadcasts to the galaxy that Leia continues to try and provoke the Avetha. As a show of good faith, Nil Spar says he will release Han if Leia orders the Fifth Fleet back to Coruscant. The story ends with Leia at home consoling her children. Senator Ben Kilnam, one of Leia's staunchest allies, arrives with more bad news. With the Avetha holding Han hostage, the Senate's ruling council is questioning Leia's ability to remain chief of state. Benny apologizes to Leia and hands her a summons to appear in front of the full Senate. He tells Leia to prepare to face a vote of no confidence. Time to take a break. When we return, I'll talk more about Shield of Lies. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Thrawn Alliances is the story of how the Grand Admiral first met Darth Vader. The two team up to stop an Imperial threat on the backwater planet Batu. The mission causes Thrawn to remember a trip he made to Batu for the Chiss Expeditionary Forces, and Lord Vader reminds him an awful lot like a young Republic general he met there years before. Check out Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about the book Shield of Lies by Michael P. QB McDowell, the second book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. In my last episode, talking about the first book, Before the Storm, I said that I found that to be a very good, very effective first book of a 3-book arc. It sets up each of the 3 storylines pretty well, even though I'm not quite as interested in the storyline with Luke looking for the fallen Aussie. I still think it sets it up well, and I find the storylines with Leia and Nil Spar, and then the storyline with Lando, Lobot, the droids on the Telgecon Vagabond, pretty interesting. A lot of that forward momentum slows down in this book, Shield of Lies. And I don't think it's because of the events of the story. For me, it slows down because of the structure of the book. The book is written focusing solely on one of the 3 storylines at a time. It begins with the Lando storyline on the Telgecon Vagabond. Then it shifts to Luke's story with Akana searching for the fallen Aussie. And finally, it gets to Leia's story with the crisis that's happening in the Cornoct cluster. I'm not a fan of how the author, Michael P. QB McDowell, presented these storylines. I prefer jumping back and forth. It holds my interest in each of the storylines more than simply focusing on one at a time. In general, I find the Lando story pretty interesting. By the 4th or 5th chapter of reading it straight, I found myself wondering what was happening with Leia and the Yvetha, as well as what was happening with Luke and Akana. In my opinion, Leia's story in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy is by far the most interesting. And I think it does that plotline a bit of a disservice by waiting until 2/3 of the way through this book before we start focusing on it. I wish the author had written this second book structurally the same way that he wrote Before the Storm and the way he writes the third book, Tyrant's Test. So, now that we've gotten my opinion about the structure out of the way, let me talk about what is actually in the storylines. I love a good puzzle, and Lando's plotline is a puzzle. What is this ship? What is the Telgecon Vagabond? Who are the Kala, the extinct alien race that apparently built this ship? Why did they build the ship? If they could build a vessel that travels between the stars, if they had that technology, why did they go extinct? Why did they stay on their planet and go extinct during the ice age that slowly froze their world? That may be the most puzzling question, in my opinion. It makes no sense. There's nothing really juicy in Lando's story character-wise. In my opinion, the stuff in the first book, Before the Storm, between Lando and Admiral Drayson, and then Lando and Colonel Pakpakat, is much more interesting character development. In Shield of Lies, Lando's story is a mystery. It's like if you were reading Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie. What happened to the Kayla? We know the race went extinct. We know that their world froze in an ice age. But that still doesn't explain why they would build a ship based on semi-organic technology that has the ability to adapt to the beings that are inside of it. At one point, Lando and Lobot discover that the atmosphere inside of the ship has changed to a breathable atmosphere. The temperature has also risen to the point where Lando and Lobot can feel comfortable taking off their helmets and their gloves in order to move around the vessel. So why did the Kayla have to die off? Why didn't at least some of the aliens board this ship until they were able to find another habitable planet? Why didn't they make a fleet of these ships and venture out to colonize an available world? I remember bits and pieces of this storyline from when I read The Black Fleet Crisis back in the 90s and then again in the early 2000s. Thankfully, I don't remember where the story goes. I don't remember what the answers are, even if there are any. I'm really looking forward to reading the third book and discovering everything I can about the Kayla, this ship. And then, of course, why does this storyline fit in this trilogy? Now, the second storyline, Luke and Akana still looking for the fallen Aussie. There's not much forward movement on this storyline in this book. I think this is probably the one story where we do get a little bit more character development than we do in the Lando plotline or Leia's plotline. Luke does a little bit of his own investigation into Akana and the fallen Aussie behind Akana's back. He discovers that she's got some information that she hasn't been sharing with him. Luke finds out that Akana at one point was married to an older man. When her husband died, Akana inherited some money, not a lot, but some money that she didn't immediately start looking for the fallen Aussie when she had a chance to. She explains that by saying she still needed to make enough money to buy her own ship. Plausible. Luke believes Akana, but there is a little bit of lingering doubt over her answers to his questions. She's still slow in teaching Luke how to access the white current, how to use it the same way the Falanasi do. I had forgotten about the little side story where Akana stops on the planet Adziri to visit her father. He thinks that maybe her estranged father could have some information about the Falanasi, not the group as a whole, but maybe has some information about Akana's mother. We learned in the first book that during the Great Jedi Purge, Akana and her mother were kind of cut off from the Falanasi when the group went into hiding, and Akana's mother died while she was still a child. I believe she was a young teenager when her mother died. So there's a hole in the information that Akana's mother gave her before she died. And ostensibly, that's the only reason why Akana goes there to Adziri, is to ask her father for any other information her father might have about her mother, and maybe that information will help find the Falanasi. Honestly, the only thing you really get, in my opinion, from this side story is how frustrated Akana is, how difficult her search has been to this point. It seems like her recruiting Luke is basically her last shot. She doesn't believe she can find her people without help. Maybe Luke Skywalker, the hero of the galaxy, and son of one of the members of the Falanasi, according to Akana, can help her. Finally, the most interesting storyline in this series, in my opinion, is Leia navigating the halls of the New Republic Senate in the wake of the military and political crisis that is happening with the Yavetha. The New Republic was born out of the defeat of the Galactic Empire. It was founded on treating all peoples in the galaxy equal, but democracy is messy. The planets in the Cornoct cluster are not yet members of the New Republic. To this point, none of them have shown any interest in joining the New Republic. And New Republic itself really has no information about the people who live inside the Cornoct cluster. As we said before, the cluster is a very dense area of stars. It has hundreds of planets, 17 of which are habitable, and on 6 of those have evolved sentient life. The Yavetha evolved on the planet Enzoth. The Yavetha are a very intelligent but very harsh, fierce people who, when the empire fell, they rebelled against the remnants of the Imperial Navy that were using the Connacht cluster as a shipyard. The Yvetha took control of the Imperial shipyards and the Imperial Black Fleet. They've used the Black Fleet to travel between the other habitable planets of the Connacht cluster and wipe out the other people living there. So when Leia and her coalition hear about this, learn about this, they believe something must be done. But again, democracy is messy. There's a large coalition of senators who believe that since these other planets in the Connacht cluster are not members of the New Republic, that they don't have any right to go in there into the cluster and do anything to the Yvetha. And the Yvetha themselves, they don't want any galactic government inside the Connacht cluster. They don't want to spread outside the cluster. They don't want to colonize any other areas of the galaxy far, far away. They just want to stay in their little neighborhood, their little cluster. But they want everyone else out. So you have another coalition in Leia's government who believes that the Yvetha get to determine the way they live themselves. So you have the question, does that self-determination allow for wiping out the people who were living on these other planets, even though those planets are not members of the New Republic government? Leia's in a very difficult position. She's a brand new chief of state. She won election after Mon Mothma stepped down. But because of Leia's role in the rebellion, she was much more hands-on in the fight against the Empire, transporting the stolen plans of the first Death Star, handing out orders to the speeder captains at Hoth, part of Han Solo's drop team on Endor, attacking the Imperial bunker. Because she was much more hands-on in actually attacking the Empire, and of course, because of who Leia's father was, many of the senators in this New Republic government are wary that Leia would have a penchant to use the military a lot more in settling disputes than what Mon Mothma would be doing. Mon Mothma seen much more as a statesperson than what Leia is seen at this point in the Legends timeline. So Leia's having a hard time fending off these political opponents. And when General Abbott and especially Admiral Drayson of New Republic Intelligence go behind Leia's back, ignore her orders about entering the Connacht cluster, it puts her in a difficult position. She can remove General Abbott from command, but the Yvetha have fired upon and destroyed a New Republic frigate. Her military advisors are telling her that she needs to advance the Fifth Fleet inside the Coronat cluster because things are going to get worse. But a large portion of the Senate is fearful that Leia is trying to consolidate power through the use of the Fifth Fleet, essentially ignoring the New Republic government's charter that all beings in the galaxy are equal and have the right to self-determination. And of course, you simply have another faction of the New Republic government that is just tired of war. Between the Clone Wars, the oppression of the Galactic Empire, the Galactic Civil War, Thrawn's attacks on the New Republic, and then the battle recently with Admiral Dalla, people are just tired of fighting. They want a time of peace. So Leia's having a hard time juggling all these factions. She knows what she wants to do. She wants to bring the Yvetha to justice for exterminating the other peoples of the Coronat cluster. But she's afraid if she does, she'll be seen as another Darth Vader. She'll be seen as another Emperor Palpatine, invading an area of space in which the people there simply want to be left alone. And Nil Spar understands this. He's betting on it. He's exploiting the fact that democracy is messy, that there are all these different factions that want different things. And he's exploiting it in such a way that not only do the Yvetha get what they want, but that it erodes the Senate's confidence in their chief of state. Now we have the added wrinkle of Nil Spar capturing Han and holding him hostage. Leia is going to have to face the full Senate for a vote of no confidence here in the third book. And we'll see where the story goes from there. I hope it's satisfying. I don't remember it, but I hope it's satisfying. Well, listener, it's time to go. If you have something you'd like to share with me, a question, an opinion, or a comment, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And don't forget to send in your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I love reading those messages, but I haven't gotten one in a while. Now, coming up on the next episode, we wrap up the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy with book number 3, Tyrant's Test, by Michael P. QB McDowell. You can look forward to that episode coming out on June 13th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends. Happy birthday, Dad.